All right, let's get it, boys. Welcome into the second edition of the 2024 Game Plan Podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. That's Greg Barnes in the middle. That's Jason Staples on the right. Not sure I'm digging this layout. I mean, my head's too big on there. Can't see my swag and stuff behind us, but it works for everybody, so I hope it works for you. Charlotte at North Carolina. The game plan. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Greg, I'm going to open with you. We were talking off air. I'm going to put you on the spot. You reviewed Charlotte and James Madison, that game. We saw some grinded out, sort of ugly type football that you love in Minnesota on last Thursday night. What'd you see when you watched Charlotte and JMU getting ready for the show?
Whew. Not much good. Not much good. So look, I know there's been a lot of questions on the message board leading up to this week into this game. Kind of like, what do you need to see to make you think that Carolina has really turned the corner, whether that be now with Conner Harrell at quarterback or the defense. And the truth of the matter is that nothing in this game is going to show us that Carolina has turned the corner. Where we are right now is that North Carolina has a series of games coming up before they start ACC play, where they have to continue to build on what they did in Minnesota. That was not a flawless performance. A lot of credit for the team getting that W for sure. But you've got to stack. Max talked about playing to the standard. That's what you have to do if you want to be a team that can compete in the ACC. So you have to take care of business against Charlotte. You got to take care of business next week, and then the following week when you got Central and JMU on top of Charlotte. These are teams that you should handle pretty easily. Now JMU is better than the other two. I'm not sure how good they actually are. I think they have like 70 new pieces in this year, which is just insane. Charlotte's got 71 newcomers. How about that? 71 newcomers, 44 transfers. And what we saw last week was nothing impressive. So this is really an opportunity for this football team to make strides, to continue to build, to get better. There's nothing that we're going to see over the next month that's going to change our opinions. And we've talked about this a lot in the offseason. Where has Carolina struggled the last couple of years? At the end of the season. Yes, the schedules get a little bit tougher, but also when you start talking about, they're not playing enough players, there's some different things that kind of go into Carolina's struggles. So we're going to have to see how this team plays as it gets into October and even November to really understand what this team is about. And you've got to build, you've got to stack, you got to play up to that standard. And that's really the key point, really, for these next 3 games, Tommy. That's going to be something that we're going to harp on time and time again.
Indeed, and Jason, we talked about this the entire offseason, but it's kind of changed a little bit, I think, for North Carolina, given the quarterback situation. Your overall thoughts here on this game against Charlotte and what we kind of want to see without spoiling the entire show here in the first 5 minutes. But what do we need to see from Conner Harrell in this offense? Because quite frankly, it wasn't very special. They won, and Max said the goal is to win the game. That's it. They won last week. Today, I think, or Saturday is a different animal, I think.
Yeah. Just for starters. Bill Connolly, does his preseason rankings and preview and all that every year. Either what the Charlotte ranking was in the SP Plus projections going into this season?
I'd bet Greg does.
115?
127th.
Out of.
Okay. And through one game, they're right on track to meet expectations. So what you really expect and what you want to see in this game, this is one of those games where if I'm Mac Brown, I'm preaching, this is about you. This is about you meeting the standard of play that we expect here. This is about us as a team showing that we can focus regardless of opponent, regardless of situation, that we can that we can do our jobs and get better every week. And that it doesn't matter who's across. What matters is that we do our jobs, that we dominate the guy across from us and handle business. And if we do that, then a lot of you guys are going to get chances to play. Right? So if I'm Mac Brown, that's what I'm pushing. And the things that I want to see are, first of all, you want to see a clean and crisp first and second quarter. You want to see some sense of identity on the offensive side. Okay, this is who we're going to be with the new quarterback situation. This is what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to go about things, and we're going to do it crisply. We're going to execute, get the game to 28-0 or so in the first half. 21-0's fine, but get yourself a nice solid lead, and then see if you can start to rotate a lot of the bodies that you're going to need in order that you're going to need to take snaps, that you're going to need to continue to grow into that mid-season area and all of that to make sure that you're a better team late in the year. To me, this kind of game is all about, this is the kind of game where you want to bring Larry Fedora back for, guest coaching for a week. Because Fedora always used to blow the doors off of these teams, right? You want to early execute, get a couple scores, and then start to rotate. You want to get Omarion Hampton just enough to get him into a quick lather in the first half and then get him out of there. It's not worth getting him, anywhere and tear in this game. Get Darwin Barlow some carries. Get him an opportunity to get some live reps. Those are the things that you're wanting to do in this game. And anything beyond that is gravy. Anything that involves an injury to anyone on your team in this game, that makes this game, that's what basically boils down to a kind of loss in this game, is losing anybody to, something stupid in this kind of game.
Yeah, Greg. That's 100% it. Go
No,
ahead.
it is. And to build on that, what are you trying to do in this game first and foremost, beyond the injury part that Jason brought up there? You're trying to get Conner Harrell comfortable. You're trying to get him the scheme in place that fits him, that you like. So what does that mean? That means the defense needs to shut Charlotte out. That's got to be the goal. JMU held them to 7 points.
It means no busts.
Yeah, right. You need to be perfect. And that's the standard, right? And that's, granted, asking anybody to hold somebody scoreless is a tough ask. But that's the mindset. Because if you can be flawless defensively, then Carolina can have some early success, build a double-digit lead, and you have a lot of opportunity there to let Conner Harrell grow. If you don't do those things and the Charlotte offense is having some success, well, you can't be quite as flexible. You can't open things up maybe the way you would like to, just to get him, you're doing unique things and getting him comfortable in kind of your base sets. And I think that's the key part of it, is that the defense needs to play better than they did last week in Minnesota, really shut Charlotte down, to really set up the offense to be able to build on what they've seen in the past. Granted, last week you didn't see much from Conner, but we did see a good bit from him against West Virginia, even though he was banged up. So you gotta give him reps, give him confidence in live game action.
Almost treat it like a passing scrimmage in that respect. And the thing you really want for him in terms of getting into rhythm is you do want him to get into a passing rhythm. This is not a game where you want to flash his running ability a bunch. You want him to get comfortable doing the stuff that teams are going to force him to do later. So what you want is this to be a crisp game where he and the receivers, and you want to play more receivers in this game because you want to find out who's actually going to perform for you with the lights on. But you want to play those guys and then and see the ball not hit the ground. That's the other part of this. When I'm talking about crisp execution, I'm talking about a lot of that. What are the throws and concepts that he's comfortable with? Have him do those and rep them and get into a rhythm and have those receivers keep the ball from hitting the ground and keep getting first downs and touchdowns and make this a worthwhile game in that respect. And I also, frankly, think you need to get the third guy who's now the second guy. I think you need to get Jacoby Criswell some reps in the second half in this game if you get up big. You give him a couple drives just because you just never know. I mean, you just lost your starter in game one, and as much as Harrell runs and how he moves and all that, you better have you better have everybody ready. So that's another thing that you want to do in this game. You really need to get into your depth.
Yeah, this is also a game for me, and I want y'all's take, is to see what Chip Lindsey's got. I mean, I think you go out. Here's my thought, and I'm a little bit flipped from y'all. I feel like you go out and let it all hang out early. To your point, Jason, let him see what he can do. Run whatever you might have to use down the road to see what Conner Harrell can do. You don't need to see him run. We know he can run. To your point, he's got to pass, run all sorts of sets and all sorts of plays. And, Greg, I think that's the key here and I think it helps that they've got 3 of these games back to back to back, because you can work here early, get Criswell some reps, work Harrell half, get Criswell some reps going down. But I just think you let it all hang out early. And then if you get in a situation, see, I love it. I've been wanting to disagree with Jason for how many years? 10 years now. Greg, you tell me why I'm right or why I'm wrong, and then Jason can get in here and tell me why I'm wrong.
I actually agree with you, Tommy. We'll let Jason disagree. Look, this is a situation where Conner has not played much. He played in the bowl game, got banged up, and they really were kind of limited with him last week. I think yes, you want to win the ACC, but I think the way that you win the ACC is you take the training wheels off and you let him show you what he can do. And does that mean that Duke maybe gets a little bit of an edge because you're not holding anything back? Sure, but everybody else is going to get a look anyway. And if you're losing at Duke, I mean, we're really not talking about an ACC championship type team anyway. So I agree. You don't need him to run. You don't want him to get hurt. And that's the question I have for Jason is, we knew a couple years ago when Carolina didn't have depth at quarterback. And so Sam Howell was instructed not to run near as much as he had been because that was a concern. And I think Drake May had a little bit of that same issue. So even though Conner is known for his athleticism, and that's a key part of what he can provide, do you want him running a whole lot? Because you may not have much there behind him. But I agree, Tommy. I think you let him throw it. You let him build some confidence in these games and see what he's got and see if you can trust him. And I think that's the only way this is going to work. And as you said, with 3 games coming up, there's no reason not to do that, in my opinion.
There you go, Jason. You were adamant shaking that head.
I want to know what exactly you mean by let it all hang out.
Just, there's no reason for me to see this team stay vanilla or whatever you want to call it. You've got to see what Conner Harrell can do. And I don't want to hear about practice, because if we're talking about practice, DJU is an All-American. From what I've heard from you and what I've heard from everybody else that follows Florida State, I want to see what he can do against people not wearing the same color jerseys, whether it's the long ball, whether it's whatever. That's what I mean. You play to win the game, but you also have to play for the rest of the season, like Greg and I are saying. And who cares if other teams see what you got? I mean,
well, so we're defining letting it all hang out a little differently.
I open the playbook wide open and see what he can do and see what he can't. And if he can't do it,
to me, that's a little different from what you're saying. To me, what I want to do is I'm not hiding anything in terms of the base stuff that I run. I want to see what concepts he's comfortable with and how he's going to handle those things in live action. It's not like, okay, well, I run a lot of mesh rail, but I'm not going to run that in this game because other teams might see that we run mesh rail, or we're going to run snag 7 times per game, but this one we're not. No, you run your default passing game. That the pass packages that you have in for this quarterback that he's comfortable with, you run all that stuff. And it's like a passing scrimmage. You want to run that and it be crisp. When I talk about letting it all hang out scheme wise, I'm talking about, we've talked about this before on this show for years, that there's kitchen sink games and there's regular games, right? This ain't no kitchen sink game, y'all. If you're having to, one of the real signs that things were not good between Florida State when they played this last week against Boston College was when they ran a reverse pass. Right? They ran a reverse pass and then a little bit later a double pass. But before the fourth quarter against Boston College, when you're having to do that against a team, and that's not a rival or like those are not big game plays, and you're emptying your playbook of that stuff against this kind of team, that's a really bad sign. That's a sign that things are not going as they should. You don't touch that stuff in this game.
Sure.
Any sort of wrinkles that you have in there, no, you leave that stuff in there, and ideally you leave that in there and you keep it in for Duke, but you don't pull it out unless you need it. You want to keep that stuff in there, and then when you go down to Tallahassee, if that team's managed to win a game by then, you pull it out against them. And if you manage to get through them without doing it, then what do? You save it for Raleigh, right? You save it for when NC State actually comes to town, right? So you want to have the tendency breakers and the wrinkles. That's when the playbook's wide open, is when you're going, okay, we've been setting this up. We run mesh rail all the time. We run mesh rail. But now, instead of running mesh rail with the back up the sideline on the rail, we're going to run mesh, and we're going to have that back do a little Texas route, a follow, and they're going to run outside trying to get to that. He's going to come right inside, and this is going to gut him right up the seam. That's the stuff that you're doing when the playbook's wide open. Right. You don't call any of that stuff in this game. But as far as your base pass plays and things, your base concepts, you run all that stuff. It's that's your bread and butter. This is a bread and butter game. You run all of your default stuff.
Yeah, I think what Tommy and I are getting at is that you don't overly protect him. You let him run all the basic stuff and see what he can do without it being scaled down any.
It's exactly right. I know he can turn around. Everybody knows he can turn around and hand the ball to Hampton or to Barlow, whoever's playing. I do agree that Hampton gets a good sweat up, gets a few yards, and then gets out of there.
Give him 8 to 10 carries is my view.
Yeah, and get him out. But I think for Harrell, I don't think you leave any concept or any throw on the table and not see it used in this game. I just think it's important, and especially for over the next 3 weeks. Greg?
Yeah, I was going to say, we know what Mac Brown's history is, though, with playing players, correct? He's pretty adamant that he's going to play the bulk of his starters into the third quarter, and most of the time, at least until the fourth quarter.
I think you, at worst, at one series in the third quarter. And for those of you watching on YouTube, Jason dipped out because he's got to turn the light off in his daughter's rooms as they go to sleep. Man, I love it. That's a girl dad for you.
That
a
is,
girl
for
dad
sure.
that loves football. But Greg, when you're looking at this standard thing, and North Carolina players have started to say it a lot. Mac Brown says it a lot. Collins and all them. What exactly? I mean, is the standard known at this point? One game in. I mean, I know what the standard theoretically looks like, but how do you even know what your standard is until you get a little bit deeper in the season and playing some tough games?
Well, that's the point, Tommy, is that your standard is determined before you play any games. It's about taking care of what you're supposed to be doing in each and every play, regardless of the opponent. It doesn't matter if North Carolina Central has a FCS team or Florida State, the one-time top 10 team who was favored to win the ACC. You know what your goals are, and that exists across the board, right? I mean, it's penalties, it's filling the right gap, it's wrapping up when you tackle, it's communicating on defense, it's communicating on the offensive line, it's going through the proper reads as the quarterback. It's making sure as a wide receiver and a running back that you're blocking appropriately. It's making sure you get the right depth on your routes as a wide receiver. All these little things where against a team like a Charlotte or North Carolina Central, you can get away with being a little bit sloppy just because you're so much more talented than those teams. It's not allowing that to happen. All right, how many times have we talked about on this podcast about North Carolina not doing that. You remember the game, I guess it was in 18. Carolina goes down to ECU after winning, 3 games a year before, and saying, yeah, we knew we were better than them, and we didn't think they would play as well as they did after they got their butt kicked. So what are we talking about here? That's when you know that the standard has been lost. And it's not taking anybody for granted. It's looking at everybody the exact same way and doing all of your assignments. That's what the standard is, regardless of opponent.
That's what the weird thing is about Larry Fedora. They get their ass kicked by somebody, and you think they couldn't play football at all, and then they beat Idaho 66-0.
They had a running clock against ODU. It got so
ODU.
bad. It was 80-20, and they had a running clock in the second half.
And then they play against.
They could have scored 120 in that game if they'd have wanted.
We were in that same. I think one of my favorite pictures ever that I've been in is late J.B. Sissel took a picture across the Kenan Stadium, and it was me and my son when he was little sitting in the upper deck. We were the only 2 people in the upper deck I think that was the Idaho game. So that was the Fedora. I mean, he could wear out these teams, to your point. But Jason, let's stay on the offensive side. The offensive line did some good things against Minnesota, but they had some issues. And we can talk about the wide receivers dropping passes. But your thoughts on the rest of the offense outside of Harrell and Hampton here and what they need to accomplish other than the, quote, standard?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that you're looking for is that the offensive line continues to get opportunities to gel and make sure that, every team you play is going to have different blitz looks, different games that they play up front and all that. And the standard there is that those guys don't just blow blocks, don't blow assignments. So are you assignment sound? Are you recognizing that, okay, this is tight front, but they got three out, just off the ball out here. We're going to expect 2 to rush. We got to make sure that we slide the line here and that we pick up big on big here. And we've got this guy for the outside and the back's going to come. You got to make sure that all that stuff's done correctly, right? You've got 4 new starters on the offensive line. You got to make sure that and they did a good job in game 1 against a big front, right? But you got to make sure that you build on that so that there's no busts. You don't want any free rushers, right? You don't want it. You don't want, against this kind of team, there should be no penetration in the backfield. It's, that's the standard stuff. Are your steps correct? Are you delivering power through your second step? Are you, pass setting the right depth, maintaining your parallel shoulders to the line of scrimmage as long as possible? Are you doing things fundamentally in the way that you're supposed to do them with the level of intensity that you're supposed to do them? That's what you're looking at. And by the way, going back to Fedora, the real issue that Fedora had is that when it came time to play against the better teams, he just didn't have teams that had the defensive line to be able to handle those teams. I mean, that's what we said then, right? It's how many times have I said it's a line of scrimmage football game? I mean, football is a line of scrimmage game. And Fedora usually had pretty good offensive lines and well coached there. And they were well coached on the defensive line. They just didn't have the players on the defensive side to compete with the real top tier teams. So they'd get beat there. But then as soon as they played teams that didn't have the teams to really gut them on the defensive side, well, then it all of a sudden would swing the other way. And the other thing is, teams that didn't have the defensive lines that would eliminate the run threat for Fedora, if he could run and throw on you, it was going to be ugly. He was going to score a lot of points. And the teams that had the great defensive lines and could make his teams get one-dimensional in the passing game, that was the other thing. So it really was just a matter of line of scrimmage. If you could make him one-dimensional and force him to throw and run the football a little bit on him on the other side, well, he's probably going to lose that game. Line of scrimmage football game.
Absolutely. Greg, anything left on the offensive side? I think I need to see more from the wide receivers. Whether it's JJ and, Chris Culliver or, Nate McCullum, Kobe Paysauer, those guys need to play. I'd like to see some Jordan Shipp, Alex Taylor. I don't know if we will or not. I don't know their health, but your thoughts there before I flip it to the defensive side.
Well, as we talked about earlier, a big conversation point in this all season was rotating players and getting guys opportunities, and so this is a game for that. I will say, I think if JJ is going to be your number one guy, he's got to play a little bit better than he did Thursday night. I know he was only credited with one drop, but the other one, as Jason pointed out, that's a catch he probably needs to make in a key moment. He had the ball in his hands. If you're the number one guy, you should catch that pass. So, I just don't think we really saw enough out of him. Quarterback play wasn't that good. Certainly there wasn't the separation, but Minnesota's got a pretty solid defense. So we'll have to see some of these more games to see which kids pop. But for sure, I'd like to see some of the young guys in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, now's the time to get some separation, not only on the field, but in the wide receiver room. Let some guys step up and see if they can do it. Talk about Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com.
Woo!
I did not get this classic shirt from Johnny T-Shirt, but I would get it from them if they sold it there. They sell everything else Carolina related. Get you 10% off your order if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. You know, there might be some weather in Chapel Hill. Go get Carolina ponchos or a Carolina wind shirt from Johnny T-Shirt. Get T-shirts, jerseys. The throwback jerseys are fire. The cool thing about Johnny T-Shirt to me, and I say it every week, is the customer service. They're wonderful folks. They are always ready to help you, whether it's online or in person. And as Sean Crawley in the chat mentioned, it's almost hoodie season. Hoodie and crew neck season. Johnny T-Shirt's got you hooked up there. We're talking game plan. Charlotte at North Carolina Saturday, 3:30 on the ACC Network. We'll come right back after the break and talk about the defensive side of the ball. Is it a one-off or is it a trend? We'll talk about dots and lines with Jason Staples and Greg Barnes next. Okay, my friends, we are back. Johnny T-Shirt, Congruity, I'll talk about them a little bit later. Jason, is it a one-off or is it two dots? Defensive line performance that we saw Thursday night. I think they can repeat it. I think they probably will repeat it. But your thoughts here on what you want to see more and more of?
Well, I don't think we're going to know it. We're going to know whether it's a one-off or not until the Duke game.
Well, I mean, they've shown in the past where they can get pushed around by lesser teams. I think.
Yeah, but not by Charlotte or NC Central.
Yeah, maybe.
Right.
But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say I think last year's defensive line would have done just fine against Charlotte and NC Central. I mean, they did against those level teams. So I'm not, I'll just say this. I don't expect to be doing film room segments on like, look how much improvement there's been on the defensive line the next couple weeks. Because level of competition, like fundamentals travel. Fundamentals are fundamentals regardless of whether they're against Alabama or Georgia or against NC Central, right? Fundamentals, getting off the ball correctly, first couple steps being in the right place, hand placement, hat placement, all that stuff, pad level, all of that stuff, that it is what it is, regardless of who you play against. So you can look at that and assess like, okay, we're doing things fundamentally sound or not. But everything else is very much opponent dependent, right? I'm 42 years old now, and at a time, years ago, I was a good enough athlete to be a good defender against a lot of high quality basketball players. And, I just could be a nuisance as a defender. And if I were defending my children, I could still be a really dominant defender. The fundamentals on certain things would even be there, right? I could bend the knees. I could get down, play low, shuffle, all of that, move my feet, block a lot of shots and all that. But it is against a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And so that's going to, impact things. And then if I suddenly had to play against a decent college level player, I'm going to get torched. Even if the fundamentals are right, even if everything else is right, because I'm 42 years old and I don't have the athleticism anymore to do that, right? So, boy, that is true. Fatherhood is just like coaching. You get what you allow. And so when you're playing against a team like Charlotte or NC Central and you're a Power 3 football team, right? Those fundamentals are all you can really go on, because in some sense you're not playing against the same level of athlete. So you can't measure on success or failure or, wow, they really shut him down. Look at the fundamentals, look at the pad level, look at some of those things. And then look at the consistency in assignments and, are there any busts? If there's a 0 at the end of the game for, on the scoreboard for Charlotte, then you did do something, because those guys are on scholarship. They're not Power 3 players, but they are on scholarship. Right? So that I see the reference to Kramer beating up the little kids in karate, and you got me on that one. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So
I got a new game too. Anytime Jason says "back in my day," drink.
There you go. That's good. So the problem is I'm going to have to be careful. I'm going to get some people blacked out on these things. But the point is, when you're playing a team like Charlotte, it's all about executing your fundamentals and not having any busts, communicating and working on those things well. But as far as us evaluating, is this a 1 point, is this just a, one data point, Minnesota, or are we going to get 2 points that make a line? I don't think we can really know that until at least after the James Madison game. They've got some decent players. They're a better team, but I really think the Duke game is going to be where we find out really what this team is.
So, Greg, what's the point? I mean, what is the point here? And I don't want to disparage Charlotte at all. I mean, Charlotte is a college with they've got athletes. They've got a lot of players from Carolina, and these young men come to play. They just like every other college football team, maybe not as talented or as big and as athletic, but I think they've got enough players to make things interesting. But Greg, for you, the defensive side of the ball, what I want to see. What did Collins say? They played 20 to 21 players. I want them to see them play 40, 45 players when this participation deal comes out on Sunday morning. What you want?
Get better. I mean, seriously, these games are an opportunity to take a step forward.
They're scrimmages.
Yeah. It's a glorified scrimmage. And again, it's not an intent to disparage Charlotte, but this is an opportunity. If Carolina wants to be in the ACC conversation, which I think is possible if Conner Harrell is able to play well, because the ACC is not impressive at this point in time, these next 3 games have to be opportunities to get better. And Jason's exactly right. We're not going to necessarily learn a lot on the top end, but we can learn a lot on the low end. If Carolina doesn't play well against Charlotte,
yeah, that's pull the ripcord kind of time.
It is. That's a red flag. You shouldn't struggle against Charlotte. You shouldn't struggle against Central. JMU, okay, the jury's out on them a little bit, even though they completely revamped their coaching staff and their roster. But that's really what it comes down to is what we talked about previously, executing all the little details. And Jeff Collins knows that. He was a fantastic coordinator in the SEC. He knows how to coach football on the defensive side. And he's holding those guys accountable for those things. The kids worked all off season, all throughout August, trying to be above the line, right? If you remember back Jeff's whole thing at Georgia Tech, get above the line and you'll play in games. And that's the same type of deal they've got going on here. So that's part of it too, is during the week, as you prep, get more guys above the line so that they can play. So you can start having a legitimate 2 deep. They've got the bodies now. I mean, they've got bodies for 3 deep. And so that gives you a lot of competition. But that's really the opportunity. We can dive into the specifics of Charlotte's offense if you want to. I got some good numbers there. But for Carolina's defense, I agree with Jason. It's doing what you're supposed to do and taking care of business.
We're talking with Greg Barnes and Jason Staples on the game plan, Carolina and Charlotte in Kenan Stadium on Saturday. Anything left we need to talk about before I talk about our second sponsor, and then get some predictions in? I don't see much point in dragging it an hour. Well, I do have some questions from the chat I'll give you. But Jason,
We can
anything
address some
left?
questions.
Okay, let's address some right here. Schlegel wants to go back to the offense. Inside Carolina, how can Chip best maximize Conner's talents? Move the pocket, rollouts, run pass options. What else? Deep balls. Jason, I'll let you get that one.
So I would say a lot of read option. I mean, that's one of the things in the video this week I talked about is getting him the opportunity to get on the move, where these are give keep options for a quarterback. Those are not RPOs, as a lot of people often misidentify them. That's not an RPO unless there's a pass option as like a triple option type thing, which is what you had the other day, where he had the outside zone read and then kept that, and then you've got vertical relief on that as a potential emergency, vertical thing if the man-to-man corner comes up. That's an RPO to some degree, and they'll have some of those still. But I think one thing he's thrown pretty well when I've seen him in practice, he throws a pretty good comeback. He's actually got a strong arm and can put that ball on the line. You actually saw him. They tried that. That's the one that was incomplete to Billups along the left sideline, and he came up. He kind of skipped it, came a little short on that. But that's a play I've seen him hit in practice, and a throw that I've seen him make with some level of comfort. Now you have to protect it. One of the nice things about that is that that's the kind of throw that you can make on kind of a half roll. You can do some things on that where, it looks like a vertical for a man-to-man defensive back, and then you have the comeback or the fallout type aspect for it. So he throws there well. I think in general, he's, to my eye in practice, done better on sort of slants, and then outside the numbers type throws seem a little bit more comfortable for him than work in the middle of the field at this stage of his career. But we'll see how much he's grown in that area. I think the main thing is that you want to limit how much you're asking him to do in terms of reading the field early on. One of the advantages of being a running quarterback or a guy that has wheels is that teams are more hesitant to play certain looks against you, because they know that if, let's say they play man and they blitz you and you break contain, or you happen to hit the rush lane just right, then you're running for 40 yards before somebody sees you, because the whole defense has their back to you. So teams will typically be more hesitant to do certain things, to bring certain pressure packages with man behind it and all of that. Whereas you're going to see more, you're usually, when you're a running quarterback or a guy that has running ability, you're going to see more vanilla type coverages and, fire zone type things at most. So that helps. But then I think you can help him by saying, okay, we're going to play action. We're going to have a little boot action here. And we just want you to high-low this. That's your read. Just read that guy. Instead of, we want you to drop back, and your options are 1, 2, 3, 4 across the field. And if they're in 2 high, then I want you to start here, and that's going to reverse it. If they're in 1 high, then they're here. If they've got this, then your hot's here. There's a lot of things that you can do with a young guy that limit how much you're putting on him on some of that stuff. I think he's I think it's evident. He's a super smart guy. One thing I've heard I've been told by multiple people within the program, there is so much respect for this young man in terms of how he goes about his business and how he goes to work and when he's there and how much he's in the film room and how late he stays to do extra work at practice and all of those things. So you do expect that, he might be able to pick certain things up faster, but some guys are just more intuitive. Some guys are more studiers. I think with a young guy like him, get him to where he's doing half field stuff a lot of the time, to where, it's just read that guy high-low. And if it's not there, then tuck and don't take a loss, or, get rid of it, live to see another play. I think that can help him a lot. And you just try to get him in rhythm on that stuff. I mean, a lot of quarterback is just getting into rhythm and being confident, right? It's like being a basketball player and, you're not shooting real well, and then you go to the foul line and you see a couple go in, and you feel you feel the range out just a little bit on a shot that you've taken thousands of times, tens of thousands of times. You see that go in, and all of a sudden you make a couple, and you're jump started. All of a sudden you're a different player. You want to kind of get him in that. You want to get him to where, like, yeah, you know what, this is slowing down for me. So start him with some of those things, and then you can expand from there. But I think that's what you can do to help him.
Tommy, I'm going to try my hand at some expectation setting. I think that's going to be necessary with Conner now, especially with college football 25 coming out. My son has played that game quite a bit, and I find it interesting. And this goes back a decade to when they used to have it years ago. Talk about back in my day, Jason.
I'm drinking.
It's very fun to get a dual threat quarterback in that game, right? Who can run, and you put him in, and next thing you know, you got Randall Cunningham or Michael Vick or Jordan Travis.
I understand. Jalen Milroe is super overpowered in that game.
Exactly.
Which is ironic because he was one of the worst in the country at taking sacks last year. He was like bottom 5 in the country at pressure to sack ratio.
Correct. And that's kind of where I'm getting with this is I know Thomas Castellanos played good against FSU the other night. And the kid's talented. He's got good vision. He can kind of feel where the holes are to punch them through. That's a unique skill set. Just because you're a running quarterback and you're fast, that doesn't mean that kind of thing comes easy for a player. We've really yet to see if Conner has that skill set. So to expect him to be the next coming of a Michael Vick or Jordan Travis is putting way too much on the young man. So let him get his wheels, let him learn the offense that's in place and be able to do it on the field against live competition. And give him some margin of error. We know that coming into the season, Max Johnson won the quarterback competition, and it really wasn't that close. And that's for a reason. And so Conner has a lot of potential. As Jason said, everybody I've talked to says the same thing. They have a high regard for him. They think he has an incredible amount of talent. It's just potential right now. And they're trying to break that mold to get him to play kind of up to that potential. So just give him some time to learn the ropes and see exactly how good he can be, and don't put too much on him right now.
Yeah, Coach Bowden used to say, potential means you ain't done anything yet.
Exactly.
Right. So, but another thing about that in terms of this, I think really whenever I've watched Conner, both in practice and in games, my impression is that the game hasn't really slowed down for him yet. He's playing fast. Like so I had coaches who used to say, play fast, but don't hurry, right? Never hurry. Stop. You're hurrying. Slow down so you can play fast, right? My impression is that Conner is still at the stage where he's still trying to play fast instead of just dropping back and letting sort of seeing the code of the matrix and slowing down so that he can actually do things on time and respond and react rather than pressing a little bit.
Yep.
I think that's a big reason why Max Johnson was a good bit ahead. I mean, when we saw him in practice, it wasn't close. The reason that there was that difference at that time, I think, is very much tied to that Max, the game moved at a different speed for Max than it did for Conner. And it's not a matter of Conner's, lesser tools throwing the football or whatever. His arm's plenty strong. He's got a lot of good tools, but the game has to slow down. The benefit that he has is precisely that he's playing Charlotte, NC Central, and James Madison the next 3 weeks, which is going to give him the opportunity to, in live action, see if the game can slow down a little bit. Because if that happens, that's when you start to see the stuff like with Castellanos. And by the way, I was getting texts from folks from the FSU side of things during that game saying, man, we should have tampered and gone and gotten Castellanos this year. It would have killed 2 birds with 1 stone, man. Like, why did we go get DJU? He'd have been cheaper too. Probably could have gotten him once the coaching change happened. You could contact him and all this. Should have just gone and gotten Castellanos. Then you don't have to face him, and then, easy replacement. And frankly, they ain't wrong.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking. Watching the highlights from that game and watching that game is like, Carolina should have put together a truck size package for him and gone and gotten him. That kid's got some, but he's the same way. If he gets hurt, loses
Dude, were you
loses
about to
an
say
ankle.
loses a limb?
I was going to say loses a leg, but he gets an ankle going on in there, then
Jeez.
he's trouble. I mean, you've been going too much back in my day, man. You've made it that way.
Tommy, can I give you some Charlotte
Yes,
offensive stats?
yes. Let's get. Greg looks happy. I'm going, and while you're doing that, Greg, I'm going through the message board thread. I feel like we've covered everything that folks ask for the most part in the chat and also here in the live chat. But go ahead, Greg.
So their starting running back is Cartavius Norton out of Iowa State. He didn't play very well against JMU, but they've got a number of other guys who saw some snaps as well. Basically, the large majority of their rushing yards came after contact. 2/3 of the rushing yards after contact. They had 6 rushes that accounted for about 70% of their runs. So they really struggled outside of a few big plays to have any type of success. And if you look at the PFF numbers, it kind of backs that up, where the offensive line graded out poorly in run blocking, but they graded out pretty well against the pass rush. So you're like, okay, well, they kind of set up the quarterback, who was a Florida transfer, Max Brown, to have some success. And if you look at the numbers, he had 40 dropbacks where he was kept clean. That's impressive. 80% of his dropbacks, he was kept clean. What's not impressive is that he was 20 of 37 for 167 yards and an interception with 3 turnover-worthy plays when he was kept clean. He had a 46.8 grade kept clean, which I'm not sure that I've seen something that low. He was much worse when under pressure with a 29 grade. So, they really don't have a rushing attack of note. At least they didn't against JMU. And they've got some serious issues at quarterback. I mean, I don't know if anybody watched the game, but they were near midfield at one point. And he went back to throw the ball, and he just dropped it. And it was a turnover. I mean, like, he goes to throw it, and it just kind of falls out of his hand. No contact, no nothing. And, of course, the beginning of the game, this is not offense-related, but their kicker shanked a punt, and it went 2 yards.
Yeah, I saw that. I mean, it was like Joe Theismann-esque. Remember when Joe Theismann had that negative 7-yard punt?
That was back in your day, not mine, Tom.
I was going to say.
We're going to have these folks blacked out before the end of a short show.
Anybody says back in my day, well, we're dragging this one out. We're almost at 50 minutes. I'm going to talk about congruity because we're going to talk about predictions.
Yeah.
I predict that if you go to congruityhr.com and you email Matt at congruityhr.com, you will get a free assessment from, if you're an Inside Carolina person, you get a free assessment on how they can make your small business grow into a national brand as they've done with theirs. They handle all the heavy lifting. Small to mid-sized business owners, Inside Carolina paired together with Matt at congruityhr.com is just a recipe for success in the business world, and we need more local businesses. I shop local as much as I can, so it's awesome for me to talk about congruity, helping out local businesses and small to mid-sized businesses. Predictions. Get them in the chat. I'll throw them up as Greg and Jason are talking, but Jason and Greg, grab your piece of paper and write it down as we speak. I should have said do that before I started doing the read. Everybody's still talking about JMU. Carolina's got 2 games before JMU, folks. We're not worried about JMU yet. We will talk about them shortly. Are we ready?
Yep.
Jason, are you ready? We're not
Have
doing.
Greg go first. Hold on.
All right, I'll let Greg go first. Greg, get it.
So everything that we talked about, I mean, this is the game that North Carolina should handle. They should have success running the ball with Amarian Hampton, which sets up Conner Harrell to have a little bit of success. And I think that the defense should really be able to do what they want to do. I know the spread is 22. I think it's going to be a little bit more than that. I am writing my score as if a lot of second teamers get in, but I've got this at 38-10.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, looky here, 38-10. I'm pretty
Yep.
sure somebody said 38-10 in there. All right, Jason, go ahead and just. Hey, look at
All right.
Jason's changing
So
his
I've
right
got
now.
I've got this. I've got a better defensive outing, but I got 38-3, assuming
Look at
similar backups, and ultimately, I think. I think again, what they're going to do is they're going to be dominant. I think on both sides of the line of scrimmage against this team, and the real question is how much are they going to be able to limit. I just don't think Charlotte has the tools to move the football. So how slow is this game going to get based on both teams running the ball a bunch? So I think it's probably going to be a little bit lower possession game because they're going to run the ball a lot, both teams, and so that's why the 38 rather than a little higher. But I think this is one of those where it could be very easily more than that. Just depending on possessions. But I think you're going to see a lot of players play, and I think you're going to see a lot of running the football in this game in general. If they decide to make a passing scrimmage of it, which I think would be a good idea, and Harrell plays well, then you're looking at more points. But I think right now I'm comfortable with 38-3.
38-3, 38-10. Are we shortchanging Charlotte too much in this show? I know some people that went there, so I don't want to shortchange them too much. I want to see Jacoby Criswell get in. Fireman Lamont mentioned that. I wanted the balance of the reps that Conner Harrell needs and the offensive line reps that they need, the starters, versus the need to play the depth.
I think Harrell needs to play at least 3 quarters.
Interesting. It'll be one of those games. I'm gonna go 46-13. I think there's a turnover in there. That's the one thing, and I saw somebody mention, I think it may have been Jim in the chat, mentioned Conner Harrell's ball security. That is something I'll be watching for because he has prone to put it on the carpet. So I'm going, I don't even remember what I said. 46-13. 46-13 in Kenan Stadium. Folks will gather at the Blue Bell Tower after that one's over. Number 1 goal, win the game. Number 2 goal, get out of it healthy for North Carolina. Anything left, gentlemen, before we get out of here? Right on schedule. We are 7 minutes early. Greg, any last thoughts? What are you doing this weekend, Greg?
What am I doing this weekend?
Yeah. Does it involve being in Kenan Stadium?
No, I'm not going to be at the game. Good chance I'll be at the golf course. I've got a trivia question for you boys. Why are it's not UNCC anymore. They asked to be called Charlotte strictly. Why is Charlotte called the 49ers?
I read about it. It is referenced. What was it? It's not the Gold Rush, or is it?
It is not.
Yeah, it's not the Gold Rush. God, I read it. Do you know, Jason?
Yeah. So the 49ers in San Francisco are a reference to the Gold Rush. The one in Charlotte has to do with wasn't the school about to be closed and it was saved from closure in 49?
Yeah.
1949.
It was a school put together for the influx of servicemen coming out of World War II, which of course ended in 45. And so for a number of years, that's what they were doing. They were putting servicemen through. And of course, after about 4 years, everybody had wrapped up that was going to utilize it. And they decided that there was a big push to save the university and let it become the college that it is now. So that's the 49ers.
It was like the college campus of it was the Charlotte campus of the University of North Carolina, right?
Yep.
CC, UNC,
Charlotte Center of the University of North Carolina. Yep.
Charlotte Center. Dang it.
They do not like to be called UNCC at all, though. All right, this is getting to know your show host, Greg. What's the handicap these days?
It's very high. It's very high.
What's very high?
I'm in the middle of a swing change. I'm embarrassed to say.
You're going
Let's
to a
just say
riding?
I'm happy to break 80 these days.
In other words, so in other words, very high is about a 7.
Yeah, not quite that high, but yeah, it's
Exactly. So very high. Yeah, that's real shameful, Greg.
well,
You're
not,
that
not
guy.
shameful. Not shameful. I
I
am
don't know how
getting
you
up
can
in
live with
age.
yourself.
So I played with Greg, Jason. I guess at the Inside Carolina golf outing a couple of years ago, and Greg was like, "I played terrible. That was awful. What did you shoot? 74?" And you
75,
did.
75,
I felt like playing with you that you stunk, and you still shot 75. I don't know what I did, but yeah.
Back in
That's-
my day, I could really hit the ball.
Man,
What'd
we're
you
gonna
shoot-
have, we're gonna have
What'd
people
what'd you shoot at Pebble
dying.
Beach?
82.
There you
from
go.
the fullbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From the tips at Pebble Beach.
That's
The
really
man shoots-
respectable right there.
The man shoots 82 and talks about a high handicap.
My son beat me, so that's kind of a.
That's a good thing.
It
That's
is.
a
old you-
sore subject.
It is.
How old's your son?
He's 18, so
Yeah, so I mean that's right on pace to be a really quality player.
yep.
He wouldn't have made the trip back. He'd have had to get his own flight back. All right. It's Jason. You still owe me a round of golf, by the way. I say we get it done. We get
We're
it
gonna
done
get
at
it done this
Findlay.
fall.
We're gonna get it done at Findlay. How about that?
Oh, that's great. That's one of my favorite courses in the world is UNC Findlay.
Yeah. Shout out to everybody that's been here, 230 plus, most of the chat. Shout out to Greg and Jason for always bringing it to all these shows. Shout out to Johnny T-shirt and Congruity. I think Jason's
put that Gene Triplehorn quote up there. Got comment.
no. I'm
He
not.
says Greg had his son at the age of 12.
He's older than he looks, folks. I'm the only one with gray hair. These guys are older than I am. You never would know it. We're getting out of here. It's going off the rails. Shout out to Johnny T-shirt and Congruity. See everybody for Inside Carolina Live in the Bowls lot starting at 12:30 to 2:30 ahead of Carolina and Charlotte. Also tomorrow, Greg and I did a next level show on the world of NIL and Carolina's place in it. I think it's worthy of the listen. Tomorrow it'll drop. Until then, everybody stay safe. Thanks, boys.